What is going on, my fellow Summit Chasers? Very excited for yet another episode of the Summit Coffee Club, and I have my Tim Hortons. This is actually an ode to the conversation that Edgar and I had on our podcast that we filmed a few weeks ago now. And you know, I was disappointed initially in Tim Hortons, but the coffee still it does what coffee's supposed to do, and it wakes you up. It gets you excited for the day. It gives you a little bit of a routine. I think it's more the routine than anything else. It's going and driving. It's right around the corner from my house. It's the routine of getting into the car, and again, it's getting a little bit colder in the morning, bundling up, getting out there, cranking the heat, cranking some music, going out there, meeting my favorite lady who takes my order at Tim Hortons, and then smelling the coffee. I think it's more that than anything else. But I still love my Tim Hortons. I'm going to back them, and I'm going to hope that they turn things around here soon. But few announcements before we bring on our guests. Again, I say this every time, but get your tickets for the Young Professional Leadership Summit. We are getting pretty close to selling out. That is on October 19th in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. You can go to yplsummit.com and get your tickets. Again, it's only $60 for in-person tickets. So no matter where you are in your leadership journey, whether you are doing an interview to be a manager, maybe, whether you're thinking about even wanting to interview for a job or put your resume in for a job that would require leadership skills. It's priced for everybody, and we want that because we want it to be very inclusive to everybody, no matter where they are in their journey, whether they're business owners, executives, whatever it is. And all of the proceeds, this isn't for profit. We're not doing this event to make any money. All the proceeds above cost are going to Parents for Education. It is a nonprofit in Toronto, so we're very, very excited about that. We're very, very blessed and excited to be able to support them as much as possible. We actually have a new team member on the Summit Chaser team who's been really helping us. Her name is Chantal. She is amazing at planning events and making them very interactive, making them very engaging and very challenging for the people in the crowd. So if you want to come to an event that's actually going to get you better, that's going to give you tangible takeaways, get you outside of your comfort zone, which is a good thing, by the way. I know a lot of people don't think that's a good thing, but getting outside your comfort zone is actually a good thing. So sign up for that, and it'll be a very similar experience online, $20 for the virtual event as well. So get your tickets, yplsummit.com. There's yplsummit.com. And join us this coming Tuesday, where we have one of our other new team members, a brand new Summit Chaser team member. We're very excited to have this individual on our team. His name is Paco. I'm not going to release any other information other than that, but he is an extremely experienced HR strategist, HR growth strategist. He's grown startups from 0 to 10 million. He's partnered and coached startups. He's even scaled bathroom tile companies. So we're very excited to have somebody so experienced on the team. Again, we want to be a team. This is Summit Chasers. This isn't the Zach show. It's not the Adrena show. It's not the Chrissy show. We're a team. We want to be your SWAT, your business SWAT strategy partner, right? It's already lonely enough being a business owner, being a founder. We are your partner. We don't want to just be somebody who tells you what to do, and then we'll check in with you in a week. We're your partner. We go in and we invest in your business and grow it with you. So very, very excited to have him on Tuesday. So show up to the Founder Focus on Tuesday at 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. But enough of that. I'm already out of breath. Let me have a sip of my Tim Hortons coffee. Very excited for this guest. Again, we had him on the podcast. The podcast is actually being released today. So instead of me boring you with my voice, I'm going to let you watch a little bit.
Kind of takeaway from being on your show. I look at it as you want to have a different understanding of why your business has value. So what's that threshold? Like, why is there such a severe discount to privately held companies?
What are some of the biggest disconnects, I guess, between the seller and the buyer?
Take yourself out of the picture and look at it. Okay, what if I was trying to buy my company? Like, if you guys kill this thing, like if you turn this into a franchisee business, you're going to chop off 30% of your value right off the bat. Going back to the valuation conversation about this is, what does your business have that is carrying that reputation forward into the future?
So we're very excited to introduce to the Summit Coffee Club, Mr. Edgar Baum. I almost said Baum. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well. It's fun to do one of these things on a Saturday.
I know. You know what? No days off, right? David Goggins. I'm just kidding. You should definitely rest. But Yeah, it's I mean, a lot of founders that are working anyways, a lot of business owners are working anyways, and they're constantly stressed out, feeling the pressure all the time. So we wanted to be able to provide something that was not just another stuffy webinar. It was a little bit more fun, and they could see that they're not alone, and that they had the support of the community and the Summit Chaser community. So that's why we do it. But we're very excited to have you, Edgar.
Awesome, pleasure to be here. Right,
Beautiful.
throw me to the wolves. Let's go.
Oh, gee, I like the tenacity. I like the tenacity. So your podcast is coming up here pretty soon. It should actually be live on Spotify and Apple here in the next few hours. But tell everybody a little bit about what makes you so smart. I guess because you are you're very intelligent.
It's both generous and puts a high standard on me now.
No
Thank you.
pressure.
This is great, Zach. I think part of it is I've gone deep across multiple aspects of business throughout my career. There's kind of like there's generalists, there's specialists, etc. And I think kind of like the best combination that people in the domain that I'm operating in is it's good to have expertise across multiple domains. I have gone deep in multiple areas. So I've had the opportunity to go deep into valuation. I've had the ability to go deep into financial model building or market demand model building, and I've helped author things. And when you're trying to author things, it's amazing how much you leave on the cutting room floor. And that, I think, is probably one of the most critical aspects of what it is to get to know something, is to figure out what's not worth communicating the first time around. And it's an ongoing journey. I've been doing this for more than 2 decades, and I'm still learning every day.
That's amazing. What was kind of, because that's the one thing I really liked about, and that really wanted me to get you on our shows, especially the podcast and this one, was you're very outspoken about you noticed something, you noticed a problem, you noticed a gap,
Yeah.
right, in the way that a lot of privately held business owners were valuing their business, and not how they were valuing their business, but how acquirers were valuing their business. What was like the straw that broke the camel's back? Was there did somebody piss you off? Like, what was it?
I actually think what it was a number of years ago now. There's a company that I was working with that they got acquired, and they got a decent value on the transaction. Like, definitely, I would say more than kind of called the industry average, which is often cited as the reason for what you should go and sell your business for. And then within like 2 years, like not even, I think it was like 20 months later, the acquirer sold everything for more than 2.5 times what my client went and sold for. And we talked a little bit about like the private company discount when we did the podcast. And what almost made me kind of wonder is like, so is that it? Like, is it really just you need enough capital to go and buy 5 or 6 similar businesses? And because you managed to do that, you can now sell them for twice as much value. Like that to me is like just a little bit ridiculous. So ever since then, I've just kind of had a much higher degree of scrutiny that's there. And what I've also got and learned is it goes the other way. Like, you get into stupid acquisitions that are very, very emotional, and companies get bought for way more than they're worth. And then, if they're publicly listed companies, there's a write-off that goes and happens. And they're like, we were too aggressive in our targets. But either way, like, call it, like, nobody gets called physically hurt, but like somebody kind of really walks away with a bad taste in their mouth. So what I kind of look at it as kind of like responsible valuation, which is how do you kind of have all parties win to the best way possible? And it might need to change the structure. It might need to be that the seller stays within the business and continues to provide the advantage that they have. Or and I don't mean like golden handcuffs that you have to be there for years and years and years, but like they have an incentive of making sure that that valuation premium is realized and they get to participate in it. So it's a very different philosophy, I think, in terms of how M&A should be. And I can tell you from my professional experience that much of the traditional private equity world would disagree with kind of what I espouse. And I would even suspect like publicly held or privately held companies would look at things the same way. So, so we'll see. But I like bringing an alternative lens, and I like having people just think that extra little bit, hopefully, to reduce risk or add value.
What was So you mentioned a company getting acquired for way too much money. What would be like a reason, or what's like the most ridiculous reason you can think of that a company has? If you have an example, that'd be great. Has sold for way too much. Like, what makes it overvalued?
Um, so things that I would say kind of are driving overvalue is like kind of like momentary scarcity. You're seeing that in
Mhm,
the technology
mhm,
arena right now, where
mhm,
there have been companies that are acquired just because of the staff that they have. And there's
mhm,
this weird assumption that is made, oh, I'm going to hire this team of 20, 30, 40, 200 people, and they're all going to stay. And it's like, wait, it's like it was cheaper for you to go and buy a company and get access to, say, I don't know, like 100 AI engineers or something like
mhm.
that. That's actually even much lower like that. Like people are making acquisitions of companies to get access to 8 AI engineers
Yeah.
than it is to go and try and hire them. But then it's like, but are you actually thinking through to call what I call the day after valuation,
Mhm,
which is, are those people going to be there? Like, are you
mhm,
incentivizing them to stick around
mhm.
to justify the premium that you just went and paid? And I find like sometimes people get way too trapped in valuing the transaction and they're forgetting what the value of the company is on the day after or the year after.
Mhm.
And they don't do that like reconciliation back to the beginning. And I can't name names, but I was privy to a transaction that happened in the technology arena. Must have been about 5, 6 years ago now. Prominent, I think, with VC backed still company at the time, made an acquisition, and I believe within 2.5 years they had lost 70 or 80% of the staff, and 90% or so of the customers didn't renew.
Oh wow.
Right. So this is why I kind of go into why it's so critical to understand, why does your customer buy? Why
Mhm,
does your customer buy when you're not around? If you, who would your customer buy if they got upset with you? Why would they get upset with you? So you're kind of getting into a lot of questions that I think aren't there, and it kind of goes back to what I still have kind of called my second annoyance about in the marketplace is transactions purely from a financial engineering point of view.
yeah.
Like people are literally just going and saying, "Oh, okay, this company makes $1 million in EBITDA per year. Industry multiples are 4.5 times EBITDA. Here you go, Zach. Here's $4.5 million. You should sell." And you're like, wait, what? Where did you come up with this notion from? Like, have you gone and seen that our customer retention rate is 98% and the industry average is
Mhm,
85%? Most of our customers are coming in and renewing at a higher amount, or they're coming in and buying more frequently than our competitors do into our stores. Like whatever the
mhm,
industry is. So people are like, well, yeah, but like, you only make $1 million a year.
mhm.
Okay. But we make that $1 million a year with much greater certainty than that other random company over there
Yeah,
making $1 million a year. So
yeah.
this is kind of what I like to kind of call like bringing the humanity back into business, which
Mhm.
I find like I hate spreadsheet forecasting. I hate spreadsheet valuations. Yes, you use them as a tool, but if they're like the only place that you start and end on, you got a real
Mhm.
problem on your hands.
Yeah. Well, it's also looking at the future. You have to be able to look at the future value of the company, or perceived future value of the company. Nobody can tell the future, but you can still see, through market trends, through past events and that kind of stuff, and you can see where trends are going and what the future value of a company is. And a lot
Hmm.
of that does a lot, and when a lot of the perceived future value of a company is based on how have they performed over the last how many years, and how are they currently, like you just said, how are they currently performing? Is it stable? Did they have it like a really quick spike, and
Yeah.
then that's why they're at $1 million this year? Or was it like they did 800 of 500,000 last year, 250 the year before, and they're kind of steadily growing, and then they have a coherent strategy on why that happened? Like they can explain to you why that happened, right? Like I think
Yeah.
that's a big key too. Like they can
So
explain.
I kind of go at it from a what I call like demand side valuation. Like
Mhm.
if you can credibly demonstrate that you have demand in the marketplace that you're growing
Yeah.
into, like people are waiting to be able to buy your products or services. And they
Mhm.
may not be able to right now because like they're contractually locked in or something like that.
Mhm.
We partnered up with a Silicon Valley firm called Liquid Agency last year, and we launched something called the Challenger Index. And we looked at like multi-year expectations of companies, and then about a month ago we launched it for consumers, of like, who do people think they're going to be buying from the next year, 2 years, 5 years, depending on the industry that's there. And you go and see that people, like, who they're buying from now isn't always a match for who they want to buy from in the future. And if you're able to go and figure out what that is, and can you protect that transaction into actually happening, like, it's like, hey, like, Zach, I really, really want to buy a product. I can't do it until the end of next year. And you're like, oh my gosh, like, I'm going to nurture this relationship as much as I can for the next 15 months. So that, when Edgar's contract, comes up for renewal with a competitor, they're going to actually switch to us instead. And I'm going to make sure that piece is there. I think that's a really big part of what you want to be able to go and articulate. So when we went and did that Challenger Index, and happy to provide the link for you, Zach, for others who want to kind of go and take a look and read it, a lot of the principle that it's there is that the entire market can't be buying at the same time. So if you come out and say, hey, just today only 30% off, like, there's people like, oh God, I wish I could take advantage of this, but like, I need to go and get my finance team approved, or my spouse needs to approve this, or I need to figure out for my kids which color they want, and they're like, backpacking adventure in the Amazon right now. It's like that aspect of how things work, it just doesn't make sense in the marketplace, as you can understand, right? So that's something to kind of go and convey.
What and I know you probably can't name names, well, don't name names, but what's kind of been the biggest disconnect? And I kind of asked this on the podcast. I think there's a little clip of it too, even in there. The biggest disconnect that you've seen from the business owner to what they perceive as the value of their business. Has it been that they overvalue it? Is it more likely that they're going to overvalue their business, or is it much more likely that business owners undervalue their business? And then why, in each of those scenarios, what is usually the case? Like, why is that?
Okay, so I'll speak to kind of what I'm noticing has happened on both sides of it. So overvaluing is usually they think everything's going to hit. Right. So that's usually the typical one. And it could be as simple as, oh, like, we've been steadily generating $8 million a year in business, and we're just going to keep hitting it for the next, 5-10 years. And it's like, okay, why? And they're like, well, that's just the way it's always been. It's like, no, it hasn't. At some point, your company was a $5 million business. At some point, it was a $200,000 per year business. Like it can't be. It's the way it's always been, right? So kind of going and articulating that part is there. Another aspect that I think drives a lot of overvaluation, especially in smaller businesses, is that founders or small leadership teams don't actually understand how hard they are to replace. Right? Like, if you kind of go and ask yourself the question, like, if I went away for 6 months, can the company succeed as well without me? And I look like it's an awkward question to go and ask. Like, I ask that myself on a regular basis. Like, I'm trying to build up a business that, if something did happen, and I have to step away from the business for 6 months, it could generally hum and continue to grow without me. Like, that is an aspiration for a lot of people. And I don't think enough individuals have kind of gone and done that assessment for themselves. Like, are they in that position? And that, by the way, is a very good signal that you have a sellable company at a mutually acceptable valuation, when you or the rest of the leadership team could relatively quickly step back from the company. So that's kind of called the valuation. It's like the ability to replace you. And that's usually kind of what I would call is the unconscious discount that is applied when there's a roll-up done by private equity held companies or other organizations. They're like, oh yeah, like, we're not going to be able to get the leadership team to kind of keep moving the same momentum, and we have a different strategy for what we're trying to do, and we just don't want to pay that much and carry that risk. Okay. So then on the undervaluing side, what I would kind of go and say is the typical driver of undervaluing is that people don't understand why their company makes money that the future buyer can replicate. And the why the company makes money that is better than others in the industry. Like, one of our clients out of us that we went and worked with was one of the most profitable companies in their sector across North America. But I don't think the seller knew. Like, we worked with the buyer after the transaction happened. I don't think the seller knew just how profitable they were. The buyer was surprised to discover how profitable they truly were after the seller's leadership team kind of like wrapped up and exited the organization. And that's an important thing that you need to be able to understand.
Mhm.
And it kind of points to, why you need to understand your business on your vertical fundamentals. Like, you need to understand your business and why it's valuable just as a business.
Mhm.
Forget industry comparables, forget, benchmarks, all this other stuff that's there. Forget stuff that banks tell you, whoever the heck it is going to be, right?
Yeah.
And then you also need to be responsible once you really understand the fundamentals of why your business is worth what it's worth. Now you go and compare it to industry comparables.
Mhm. That was really interesting because that was a fairly a big chunk of the topic during our podcast, and that got me kind of going down a little bit of a rabbit hole as well. Even just with a lot of our clients, how common it is of founders, business owners, to not truly understand how their business is successful, why their business is successful, and then also, and then in doing that introspection, you find a lot of ways that you misleveraging your strengths too,
Yeah.
because a lot of them think that their business is being successful for one reason, right? And a lot of times it's they're confident in their product or confident in their service or whatever it is, right? And their knowledge and of the industry and that kind of stuff, but they're leveraging it kind of in the wrong direction. And then in doing that, that introspective work of understanding, okay, these are our strengths. Are we putting it in the right direction, or is there somewhere where we could leverage it even stronger to then increase our value even more? And it's super common, because that's like the basis of, when we do strategic work with our strategic audits with our clients, is, are you leveraging your strengths in the right way? And it's crazy common how it often they either don't know really what their strengths are, or they're leveraging them in the wrong, like completely wrong direction.
Yeah, what I would also go and add is that there's an element of kind of like patience and willingness to kind of go and demonstrate this as well.
Mm-hmm.
What you're just pointing to, once people actually go and start doing that, they're like, wow, like I might have this upside inside the business, or I have a risk that
Mm-hmm.
I need to deal with that I didn't realize was there. Like, I really want to emphasize, a lot of business leaders don't sufficiently take a look at the risks. They don't want to kind of see where their baby is ugly. Right? Maybe it's a horrible analogy, but I'll just leave it in that moment, right? And it's
There he
like,
is.
so the piece that I'm kind of talking to is like, you got to figure out what that risk is, and you
Yeah.
may need to have the patience to be able to demonstrate that you have either resolved it or that you're in the process of resolving it. And
Mm-hmm.
I really want to emphasize one thing that's here from kind of the lens to valuation that I bring. Opportunity identification and putting it into your operations to take advantage of that opportunity is equivalent to risk identification
Mm-hmm.
and putting it into your operations that you're mitigating or anticipating that risk, and you're
Mm-hmm.
able to handle that. And I think too many people are like reactionary on the risk side, and they inflate the value of the opportunity. Like, the way that I look at it is, you can't make money without spending money. And if you have an opportunity and you're like, oh, like, look, this opportunity is amazing. Like, if we take our product to China, or we take our product to India, or we take our product to Brazil, it's like, it's going to do really, really well. It's like, great. So why aren't you doing it? They're like, oh, well, we need like $10 million.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So there's actually no opportunity. It's the idea of the opportunity. And that is
Yeah.
where I think people get into the trap of the overvaluing of the business.
Yeah.
So you either need to be able to very clearly articulate, here's how I spend the first $500,000, here's how I spend the next $500,000, this is how long it's going to go and take to start generating money. And you go and show that to the seller, and they're like, oh yeah, I understand your logic, and I have $10 million that I can put into this business after I buy it. Zach, are you going to stick around for at least 2-3 years to show this, and I'll participate in that upside with you, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to put in that extra $10 million bucks. But if you're
Yeah.
like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to leave my business. They're like, yeah, then the discount is justified.
Yeah.
You're not willing to participate in the upside on
Mm-hmm.
the risk that the buyer is going and putting in with the 10 million. So those
Mm-hmm.
are the kind of like recommendations that I've kind of go and put into how to think through it. And I think one
Mm-hmm.
of the points that you had in that opening intro video from when we recorded the podcast is would you buy your own business?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's the most basic piece, which is why I love like vertical valuation, which is, take a look at your business, look at it operationally, and if you got an extra $1 million, is the business going to be worth more than $1 million?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it's like, the day that you transfer the cash in, it's going to be worth, $1 million more because it
Mhm.
just got the cash in it. But how quickly can you turn that $1 million into $1.5 million, into 2, into 3, into 4? That is what goes and drives
Yeah.
value.
Well,
So
that objective view is so important. It's so important, and that's why, whether it's a third party coming in and looking at it, or you doing the exercise yourself of asking, would I buy this business? Because what I see a lot of when we're doing like strategy development is so many of them, and you hit the nail on the head, where they don't take their risks, the challenges and issues that they're facing seriously. Because a lot of strategies, and you kind of hit that point too, is it's just kind of just like a wish list. They just set a bunch of goals and
yeah,
they're just a wish list. It's like, oh well, our company, we're projecting 20% growth year over year. It's like, okay, why? How? Like, where did that number come from? And what are the actionables? And what challenges are you going to face in hitting that? Because everyone has different competitors.
yeah,
As they get bigger, your competitors change. Your breadth gets wider, and you start knocking on doors to other people. So there's perceived challenges that you have to overcome. And there's a really interesting case study on this and this particular um, idea of clearly identifying risks and challenges when you're developing a strategy. And there was a school district. It was in Los Angeles, in a very impoverished part of the city, and they dumped about $15 million into, which isn't a ton of money in a large school district like that, but they dumped $15 million to increase the perceived, and the way they base success in schools is ridiculous. I can't remember what the score is. I can't remember the acronyms called for the score, but basically it incentivizes schools to just kick out the kids that aren't performing really well, right? Because it's all based on like an average
yeah,
score of your
yeah,
school, right? So their strategy, one of their strategy to improve this was to, and it was just a bunch of like to-do lists. It was like, okay, we're going to develop a strong relationship with the parents, and we're going to create a very strong parent board, right? And we're going to have this many meetings a month and this many meetings a year, and we're going to get build the community up and all this kind of good stuff. But it didn't take into account the challenges, like what the real true challenges were. And if you would have looked at the communities that they were in, most of the parents they're either illegal immigrants, so they didn't want any of their names on any of the things. They weren't going to sign up for anything, or a lot of them were like young parents that had minimum wage jobs,
hmm
so they didn't have time to do any of that stuff. So barely, a lot of them didn't even know how to read a book. They weren't educated to make any decisions, to make any, to give any positive reinforcement or feedback or anything like that. So the strategy, without the strategy taking an honest account for the challenges, it's just, now you have a wish list, right? And there's so
yeah.
many businesses that have just like these wish list of goals and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was really interesting that you brought that point up in relation to also the valuation of a business, right?
Yeah, what you're also kind of pointing to is why like the ability to demonstrate execution is so critical,
Yeah.
right? Like I go and take a look at like, I always like starting with actually like the vertical valuation of a company. I
Hmm.
don't actually like going straight to comparables first. And there's typically like five major buckets that I look at that are there. Like one is I look at gross revenue.
Hmm.
But it's not just like, oh, it's a $3 million per year company, or it's a $30 million per year company, or $300 million per year company. That's actually meaningless. What I
Yeah.
want to understand is what is the composition of that revenue.
Hmm.
So, if you're a $3 million per year company and half of your revenue comes from one customer, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Or like you're a $3 million mini franchise in your town or city, and $2 million of it comes from one out of six locations. You got a
Mm-hmm.
problem,
Hmm.
right? So I understanding like the mix of your gross revenue, right, and how volatile it is really really critical, right? Like
Hmm.
if you're having to add 20% new customers every year because you're losing 20% of your customers every year,
Hmm.
that's a real problem. So you got to look at like volatility. What's the defensibility of that revenue? And by the way, this doesn't matter whether you're a technology company, whether you're an HVAC installator, whether you're a coffee shop, whatever. It doesn't matter, right? So the next one that I go and kind of take a look at is revenue growth. Okay, so it's like how much does your revenue grow inside your organization? So kind of building on that, like how much are you losing, how much are you adding? But
Hmm.
from a revenue growth point of view, it's like, why do you have revenue growth? Is it because Zach is all of a sudden coming in 3 times a week to my coffee shop instead of twice a week? Right? Or is it that Zach's coming in still twice a week, but he's now buying twice as much?
Yeah.
Like understanding the
Hmm.
composition of your revenue growth is really,
Hmm.
really critical. And then I kind of get into what I call is like the recurring revenue understanding of your business. Like, why does your company keep making money? Like, if you just did nothing in your business, like you just froze how it ran, like you didn't try and do anything new to it, how much can you predict next month's revenue, next quarter's revenue, next year's revenue, next 5 years revenue? And like the simple examples of it would be like in the coffee shop, right? We're just not going to try and expand our coffee shop at all. We're just going to keep delivering what we're doing. What percentage of the local community are just going to keep coming back on a regular basis? Right? Like if you can kind of get a pretty good sense of what that's going to look like, that's really great. You're running a software company. What percentage of customers do we think are going to renew their software license or subscription with us? Like how much can we go and figure that out, right? Or like, hey, we are reliably getting 10% referrals every single month to our services business. So you got to kind of track like what are those behavioral elements that are there, and that kind of tells you like what's the basis of your recurring revenue. Because if you can identify how much of your recurring revenue costs you $0 in incremental spend, like meaning like just the way your business runs churns revenue for you, that is a godsend. And you want to kind of articulate that, like that's where the essence of why your business's value is. And then you got to go and look at, after that, does that revenue make money? Right? Because
Understood.
I put this thing on sale. Hey, Zach, it's 50% off today. And you're like, oh my God, yeah, I'm going to go buy from the store. And it's like, oh, okay. No, I'm going to wait until the next sale. Well, if Zach puts it on sale, so if I put it on sale and Zach buys it at 50% off, I'm not going to make money. Or if I am, it's going to make very little money. And if you're only going to buy when I have it at 50% off, that's a problem.
How much? And this is one thing that we look at when we're doing equity deals. Is over time, if their growth is steady, we look at, are their profit margins tracking with that growth? So are they, because we look at the more you make, right? You should, in different businesses, it's going to look a little bit different, but are you creating that network effect?
Yeah.
Where if you do have a strong network effect, like especially your marketing costs should really decrease. Like your percentage of marketing costs should really decrease. How much does that take into account? So if you're a business who's at 500,000 and you have like, let's say you have like a 20% marketing cost, right, on average, and then you're at $1 million, but now so you doubled in gross revenue, but your net profit is half of that. So your marketing cost goes to 10% from 20 to 10%.
Yeah.
How much of that gets taken into account with valuations?
So I don't. So here's kind of called another mini rant from me on what I'm noticing a lot of valuations that's there. A lot of valuations are kind of done like snapshot in time or kind of like an abstract. Like you just take a look at the average profit margin.
Yeah.
That is there. I hate doing that. I want to know what is your range of profit margin? Okay. So if I sell something for $10 at my coffee shop versus I go and sell something for $2 at my coffee shops or $50 for my coffee shop, like a large order.
Yeah.
Right. What's my unit costs to be able to go and do that, or my unit servicing cost that's there? You really got to understand that aspect of it, because you need to go and show the profit margin. Like even on your marketing costs that you go and talk about that, like I'm really terrified when a lot of companies just go and give me top line marketing spend data, and they're like, oh yeah, like our average cost of customer acquisition is like $18, and we sell this thing for $100. I'm like, whoa, hold on. Do you have any $100 sales that cost you more than $100 to acquire?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, we don't know that. I'm like, you got to figure that out. Like when I talk about profit margin, I don't talk about the fact that your business at $3 million made $300,000 in profit.
Yeah.
What I want to know is, did you have $2.5 million of your business make a $500,000 profit? And then you had $500,000 of your business lose you $200,000. Like if you can't answer that from a profit margin point of view, this is why I hate like balance sheet and income statement comparisons year over year, because what I actually want to know is like, where's the money being made? Right. And is it that like we actually have to run this $500,000 worth of the business at a $200,000 loss to be able to have a $2.5 million business that makes $500,000 in profit? That question is not asked enough in almost all of the transactions that I've been participating in, because they're like, oh, we'll just get rid of that $500,000 in revenue, and now we're going to have a $2.5 million business making $500,000 a year in revenue. And that may not be the case. Like,
Yeah.
it might be the actual cost of the business, that the core of the business needs to have a money losing portion to prop up the money generating one. And
Yeah.
not enough people understand it, because you got to understand, how does your revenue come into your company? How does the customer go and participate it? And then what's the source of the cash flow? And it can't be average cash flow. It can't be sum of cash flow. It's the sequence of cash flow. Like, I love your marketing piece that you went and said, we're spending, you said 20%, right? So we're spending $100,000 on marketing per year. Great. So I spend it on marketing, but it's not, I'm spending $100,000 on marketing per year. I'm spending $100,000 on marketing throughout the year. It's not like you're like, all right, guys, January 1st, drop that $100,000 marketing campaign and let's see that drip come in, right?
Yeah.
It's you're going and spending it through the year. So you got to figure out what the time lag is on your marketing. What did you go and do? So there's even in a small business, it actually requires a lot more analysis than I think people want to admit to, or they kind of do it by analogy, or they do it in their head. And look, I'm guilty of that as well, especially when my company was smaller. Like, I don't have a ton of transactions. I'm not going to go and analyze every single, customer when I have 3 customers. But at a certain point, you kind of got to ramp up that sophistication. So this is what I'm kind of going and saying is, what's the time lag in your cash flow? Probably one of the most critical elements on vertical valuation in businesses. Because what I notice, and this is a trap, whether I'm working with a $3 billion company, a $300 million company, or a $3 million company, is they're like, Zach, I don't want to make this investment right now because it's going to make this year look unprofitable, or it's going to make next year look less profitable. But what's it going to do to you 2 years from now? Oh, man, we're going to be minting money. So this is why I hate that quarterly or that annual trap that's there. I was working with a client a number of years ago, going back to your marketing piece. So they get their marketing budgets all approved in November. Okay. So in Q1, so January, February, March, they spent 60% of their annual marketing budget in those 3 months. And the reason why it is at some point, the finance organization had come up with this thing that you need to demonstrate money in the year that you spend it, return on money in the year that you spend it. So you think they're going to spend any money in December? Hell no. It's not going to make any money back for them in December. So they started front loading all of their spend. So by the time they got to like July or August, there's no marketing left. Right? But if a competitor who didn't have that stupid policy in place was all of a sudden running a campaign, so they had this really weird financial performance cycle in their company where January through February looked horrible because they spent too much money. Then they did really good in Q2 and early Q3. And then they got crushed in late Q3 and in Q4 because competitors who didn't have that policy, they're running marketing year round. So, they'd be making all of their money in like April through July, April through August. And the rest of the year, the company looked horrible. And so they were kind of like forcing like their own seasonal cycle that was impairing them as a company. So this is why I'm saying like vertical valuation is so critical, but you got to understand it in a time lag basis.
That's a great example of just policy and procedure not matching the strategy. It's just it should be embedded in it, right? That's a really good example of that. One other good example that or the good kind of topic that you brought up was understanding how each element of your business, each vertical of your own business feeds into the next. Because you could look at one, if you look at them individually, it could look like, okay, this one's losing a ton of money, so let's just cut that product line out, right? But then you'll see a drop here, and going back to the coffee shop maybe would be a good example. You see a lot of coffee shops, they always have coffee, like bags of coffee, whether it's their own coffee or community sourced coffee, up in the next to the register or whatever it is, and if you looked at their business, you could say, okay, that is it's losing money. That aspect is losing money. Like the products that you bring in and putting on your shelves could be losing money. But then you take that out, and then all of a sudden, you're not selling as much coffee. You're not selling as much of the donuts, right, that they're sitting next to, or as much of the sandwiches or whatever it is. And you can see that, the fact that they had that there, people would come in to just buy the coffee, but then they'd also buy all these other things, or it drew their attention over to other products and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of like, it's the same case study as like Sam Walton with Walmart, like his huge internal network effect. If you look at like the shipping lines, because they kind of changed the game when it came to those, the discount stores. It used to be, one discount store, you'd have to have like an internal population of a certain population radius of like 100,000 people or whatever. And he's like, no, as long as they're all interconnected and the region has the population to support, and we have this interconnective system of supply chain management, then it would prosper. And if you looked at each one of those individual pieces that made Walmart successful and be able to beat out, what was their main, Kmart, I think was their main competitor.
Yeah, Kmart, I think, was at the time. Zellers here.
Zellers. Oh yeah, Zellers. I remember Zellers. Zellers went out of business quick when Walmart got big. But if you looked at like each of those interconnecting pieces, like some of them probably lost them a big chunk of money if you looked at it, like between investment and what they were getting out of it. But none of it would work if it wasn't all working together. Like it was really interesting interconnecting aspect of business. But that all makes sense. We're talking about stuff that makes sense right now, Edgar. I want to talk about stuff that doesn't make sense, which is that's my way of segueing. Did you like that?
Oh, that was so smooth. I like that.
Right?
I have a positive doesn't make sense that actually makes sense when you think about an example, and then I'm going to switch to kind of call it the lateral valuation, called my industry norms, where stuff just doesn't make sense at all.
Well, we're about to talk about some of those things. Some of these will make sense. So we're going to play a game. It's called Who Did It? And so we're going to look at some companies that had. These are all publicly traded companies, because one of the things that we talked about is, why do publicly traded companies, they have such an odd outweighed valuation? Sometimes you get a privately held company, 4x 5x is pretty good, and then you look at these publicly traded and it's like 7,000x, a little over exaggerated, but sometimes not that much over exaggerated. So we're gonna see if we can guess who went through these oddly big increases in valuation, and let's see if we can guess. So let's bring up this first one. I think this is the one that you tried to guess when I gave you a bit of a hint. But who did it? Blank stock surged unexpectedly in 2018 and 19 as the company successfully expanded beyond its core business into broader athletic wear and international markets. The stock nearly doubled in value over this period. So in a year, the stock value doubled, surprising analysts who had been cautious about its growth potential. Who did it?
Was this Lululemon?
I can't remember. I think it's Lululemon. Lululemon.
Oh, yes.
Lululemon. Yes, a Canadian company. So they, I used to not be a Lululemon fan. I used to not. I know $80, $100 for a t-shirt wasn't my thing. And until I bought an $80 shirt, and they're so comfortable and they last forever. But you said obviously we're both Canadian, but you have probably more knowledge of Lululemon. What was it that caused they had a really quick rise really quickly? They kind of leveled off, and then they just blew up again. Is it because they expanded their product or their ideal client, their ICP, or what was it?
It's an interesting thing, right? Because look, I've been tracking Lululemon for 20 years, just by kind of having a very close experience. Like I loved my early Lululemon stuff. Like I think I still have a pair of pants that I think is 17 years old now.
They last,
and it's still going. So I think Lululemon kind of had two things. One, it tapped into something that drove that initial surge that was there for people, in people wanting high quality products that would be enjoyable to wear. I think it also went and crossed the there's societal changes that went and happened as well. Like we had a real kind of multi-decade, if not multi-century, separation between call it home and state, right? Like what you wore at home or out of your work environment versus what you wore at work. And that kind of started crossing. Like look at the suit market for men. It has just fallen off the face of the earth. Like dress shoes and stuff like that have really declined. Now there's a niche of it that has just remained fantastic. In fact, I would assert that quality of suits and shoes for men at that upper echelon has actually improved as a result, because that's how you maintain differentiation. But if I look at Lululemon from the other side of it, is it became an aspirational brand, and people, as like the social norms adjusted around the world, people went and wanted to buy into what they aspired to. So I think that's a portion of it. And look, I got to go and say, like, Lululemon's struggling the past few years in kind of
Yeah.
balancing between quality and things like that. And again, to me, that example of the surge that happened in 2018, 2019 was an overhyped surge, right? Like, anytime the valuation of public companies goes up a lot or plummets, the reason for it is typically that there's an expectation of a growth curve that it needs to justify the valuation going up, or there is just a complete lack of faith in a growth curve for the valuation of a company going down. Like, one of my favorite examples is Michael Kors from a number of years ago now.
Oh my God.
They IPO'd, were doing really well, breaking 20% growth quarter over quarter, year over year. And then there was one quarter where on the analyst call, they're like, "Hey, look, we came in at 18% this quarter, and we are struggling to see how we're going to go and break 20% year over year growth." So what do you think happened to the stock?
Skyrocketed.
No, fell off the face of the earth. Right? So you got to understand, they grew 18%, but because they didn't grow 20 or 21%, their stock dropped like 40%, and they've never recovered. Right?
Crazy.
So that's kind of like this is why I was going and saying your fundamentals is so critical, and why I like using Michael Kors as an example of like you if you're looking at the growth and the valuation premium of a company that is there, it frequently assumes that you're going to be growing into demand that is there. And why Lululemon spiked in that example is that they had untapped demand. Like when I was working with Cirque du Soleil years ago, they had untapped demand in the marketplace. They were just waiting, people ready to go to a Cirque show. That's why Vegas is so successful, is because people know where they can go and find Cirque du Soleil. If they want to go and see it, they go to Vegas. And if they want to wait for it to show up in their town, who knows when it's going to show up, depending on whether you're a large metro or not.
Yeah, Lululemon's an interesting one because I mean, what you said about it kind of intersected what you wear at home and what you can wear outside, right? And that they were like the first of Lululemon's really the reason that we have, like, especially all these women that are in the gyms now and have like their pants that are wedged up their ass, like that. Like Lululemon started that. Like they're the first one that had kind of like you said, it was okay to wear athletic wear because it was Lululemon out to dinner on a date, go to see the movies, or just walking around the mall. Like it's interesting what the things are that kind of pushes trends into existence. It's not even really, I would say, a trend. I mean, it's just the way it is. Like you don't, when you're going out, you don't have to dress nice. You can wear Lululemon, or you can wear, I mean, now there's a million other options now. Again, I'm wearing Lululemon pants right now. I just realized that they're very comfortable, but their brand also was because they were Canadian. They are Canadian. I would say they started in Canada. I don't know if they're Canadian anymore necessarily, but they really prided themselves on keeping it on Canadian soil and developing their stuff here and that kind of stuff. And I don't know what year this was, but when they started to outsource everything to Taiwan, like that took a big hit too, because that was part of
that was about 10 years ago, I think, is when they had their first issue. And
that really they didn't start
they didn't start the wedgie stuff. I think that's true. I think the wedgie stuff was kind of happening. They had the sheer problem.
Yeah.
And then the founder went and put both his feet in his mouth and going and saying like he didn't want certain people buying, like some people just shouldn't be buying Lululemon products.
Yeah,
like,
I remember.
Ouch! That. Like that's a problem.
Yeah, I remember that. Well, I would say, Adrina, I would say that the wedgie stuff wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Lululemon. Or at least it'd be less likely, because they started like the skin tight, stretchy pant, whatever you want to call those for women. But anyways, let's get off that topic, because speaking of feet and mouth, or foot and mouth, whatever, putting something in my mouth. Who's this one? Who did it? Blank became a household name during the COVID-19 pandemic. Its stock surged from $70 at the beginning of 2020 to over 500 by October. So that's like almost 10, 8, 7x. That's big.
Was this Zoom?
Unexpected importance of everyday life.
Was this
Is
Zoom?
that what you're going with?
There's a lot. Oh,
100%.
yes.
Yes, 100%. And that was such a, I want to say if it's luck, but they definitely took advantage of it. They definitely took advantage of that. Adrena's over here still on the wedgie products. We're talking about Zoom now. It's they definitely took advantage of that really well, because they really quickly improved. Because I remember at the beginning they were having like bandwidth issues, like there's almost too many people using it at the same time, and then they improved it really quickly. So that was kind of like a good example of them just adjusting really well and taking advantage of an opportunity. And maybe they did
But the
see it
revenue
coming.
model is the disconnect, right? Like this to
Mhm.
me is kind of false signal showing up really well. Their
Yeah,
user count skyrocketed, but the revenue base did not. But so people went and spiked the share price thinking that they were going to be making a lot of revenue.
yeah.
But that's actually not what happened. Just the user base went and subscribed.
Mm.
It's the same as if like your coffee shop has, a high school opens up next to it, and you all of a sudden go and have like a threefold increase in the people that are coming into your coffee shop, but your sales go up 10%.
Yeah, 'cause they're
Right?
all
Like
buying the
you
smaller.
got to look at the relationship between it can't be volume of people in store. It has to be the
Yeah.
volume. There has to be a corresponding increase in the volume of what you sell and the value of what you
Mhm,
sell. You know
mhm.
what I mean? Like, it's like if everybody comes in, it's like, yes, I would like to go and buy, I'd like the 25-cent lifesaver that you have on the counter.
Mm.
And it's like, oh, we're selling like a whole bunch more lifesavers now because, they got to buy something to remain in the store.
Yeah.
And that issue's there. Like, look, like Starbucks today has the problem of like too many people going and doing takeout or mobile orders. They used to have a problem 10 plus years ago where too many people were coming in to
Mm.
their store and they'd buy like a $250 coffee and they'd sit there for 6 hours working.
Yeah.
And they're like the stores are always full, but nobody's buying anything.
Yeah.
Now the problem is the stores are always empty because everybody's buying it from their mobile app, so their staff is just getting absolutely, torn through with volume. But if you walked into a Starbucks, you'd be like, God, this place is dead. But
Mhm.
then you're going and seeing all these busy bees in the back trying to go and get the work done. So, that's another aspect of it. It's like you just got to make sure you're using the right signals to figure out what is your future driver of demand. And I think
Mhm.
with Zoom, they got it completely wrong because Zoom stock has absolutely tanked since then.
Since then it has, yeah.
And if you kind of think about it, like 70 to 500, like that is a 7 times increase in valuation.
Yeah.
Like and you got to understand, like for it to go up to 500, it means it needs to stay at 500. So what does the world have to look like for Zoom to do that? And that's what I noticed with a lot of kind of like COVID spike things is we literally thought that the world was going to look like this for the next 20 years. Is
Mhm.
that we were just like that was just going to be our only means of communication. So I think
Mhm.
we really misinterpreted it. We didn't look enough at the past examples. Like we had the Spanish flu a century ago. It's like it was like horrible, like 50 million people killed in 2 years, and then
Yeah.
we kind of human immunity adjusted to it, whatever it may be, and kind of disappeared. And I think we kind of misunderstood how long this was going to go and impair us. And
Yeah.
it roughly was 2.5 years before
Mhm.
things were kind of returning to normal with the help of vaccines or kind of sadly a lot of people passing away as well from it, but
Mhm.
not to the same severity that was there 100 years ago. So
Yeah.
and this is why I kind of go into like the what if scenario that we are talking about before. Like, if you're, Zoom was held privately, it's like, oh, hey, well, no, we're worth 7 times now.
Mhm.
It's like, well, but where's the fundamentals? Like, how are we going to go and turn usage into revenue?
Mhm.
Because people were just getting free 40-minute
For
sessions
free.
for
Yeah.
going and having those calls. And it's still costing you money as Zoom. It's
Mhm.
not like it's free for you to go and host. It's
Yeah.
still costing you money to host.
Yeah.
So
Would that be because it's really hard to if you have a user base who's used to having the free, you get free 40-minute sessions or whatever it is. I think that's what it was, like free for up to
yeah.
40 minutes. Yeah, you had as many of them as you wanted, as long as
Yep.
you couldn't go over
And then
40
people would
minutes.
just go and cycle through. It's like, oh, hey, I'm getting my counter going. I'm just gonna,
Yeah.
I'll send you the new
Here's
link.
another
We'll keep
Zoom.
chatting.
Here's another link. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So for them to like, they kind of put themselves in a tough spot there, not adjusting their revenue or the revenue model earlier, because then it'd be really hard to pull that back. because then you get people just out of spite going over and using, Google Meet kind of thing. And Google they're much more robust, and their revenue comes from a million other places.
Yeah.
Right. Like then because that's their argument against, when they were going through all that stuff with the Justice Department of monopolizing search. It's like, well, we're not in search. We're actually just a big tech company. So then their perception of who they're competing with is much wider. They have a much smaller share of the market at that point, right? But so Google has all this other things that are supporting that, so they can do it for free. Where Zoom, it was hard for them to be able to pull that back. So what would you have done if you were Zoom? How would you have adjusted their revenue model at that point without pissing people off and sending them over to Google Meets, which is free?
Man, hindsight is so easy, and I would say even with Zoom, hindsight is very hard.
Yeah.
And the reason what I would kind of go and say that is look, I'm a continued Zoom user professionally, and it's like an aggravating use. Like they've kind of gone so high on security that I now sometimes need to click like 3 or 4 different buttons to be able to get into a meeting. The portion that I think is still a challenge for Zoom, but I think would have made their life easier back then, was to kind of get like a pre-approved instant Zoom link. Like if you go and FaceTime somebody on an iPhone, like you just press the button, you're in the instant FaceTime with them. Like the kind of like the pre-authorization is there. And I think what they could have gone and done with Zoom is had the opportunity for you to kind of like pre-authorize a Zoom connection that like if I'm starting this meeting, I don't need to go and force all the opt-ins. Like everybody who's on that meeting invite is there. So I think the fact that like auto start on meetings still not an opportunity. Like especially on internal, like I'm like why do I need to go and myself as the host need to opt in? Why do my team need to opt in on every single internal call? Like, why does that kind of go and happen? Like if we go and call from within Zoom, that kind of capability is easier now. But even just kind of like those simple like default memories, it's like, Edgar, like you seem to be having this call with these 2 people on a regular basis. Why don't you just have a little button that goes and says, boom, I go and do that. There's a lot of what I kind of, it's like friction reducing elements that is there. And we're talking about the whole Walmart thing. I want to kind of bring this back to what I find is a very interesting kind of driver of things you didn't think would make you money that make you money. But I love Costco's $1.50 hot dog.
Oh yeah.
Right. In terms of as a driver of like, in fact, it has kind of gotten crazier because people are like, I'm getting a hot dog for $1.50, right? Where I pay so much more somewhere else. So that perception of like value, and look, you don't even go and buy the hot dog. The fact that they have that hot dog that's there, and it's that perceptual advantage that they've gone and built up that kind of goes and drives it. We have an interesting relationship with a fruit and veggie store down the street from us, and I don't know what their magic number is, but it seems to be that like after we just buy like more than like 3 or 4 different things, they throw in like a free basket of strawberries or a free basket of blueberries. Like, and we're not even expecting it. And they just toss it in. And it's like, oh, like I have a relationship with them as a regular customer that maybe who comes in one time doesn't get it. And it kind of like reinforces that relationship. And like, how much is it really costing them to be able to kind of come back in? And remember, I was talking about before about like, what's the recurring revenue? Like, what does it cost? Like, so if you're like, oh my God, like Zach, what are you doing? Giving out hundreds of dollars of free baskets of blueberries every month. Like you should stop doing this. And you're like, hold on, no. I get these like thousands of purchases every month because I'm going and giving this out because it's that human relationship and saying thank you to the customer in a way that we can kind of go and express thank you. And what I would say is the Costco $1.50 hot dog is the thank you to the customer. And that's what I'd kind of recommend with any kind of business that's there. I was speaking to somebody in the installation business a number of years ago who went and learned something very interesting in terms of like what share of warranties were actually exercised, right? And so what he ended up doing inside his little regional business was he ended up offering free servicing for 2 years. And people just were like, holy shit, this is amazing. Of course I'm going to go and buy it from you. What percentage of people took advantage of the free servicing? was not even 12%.
Yeah.
But his business doubled.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Again, things that you go and provide that drive demand or reinforce demand
Mm-hmm.
that looks like they're costing you money. And I go back to my fundamental principle. How much do you need to spend to increase your revenue and future profits and cash flow?
Mm-hmm.
Because if
Mm-hmm.
you're only looking at how you can cut costs, your business is dead.
Yeah. That's like there's so many examples, like good examples of that. Like one is like IKEA even is a good example that like they spend so much money setting up these mazes and setting up these rooms and these elaborate like scenes for you, and then make you go through a maze. Which like if somebody was to go in there and with a traditional efficiency mindset, be like, you're wasting a lot of space here setting up all
Yeah.
these random sets for everybody. And then the food court, they had like a cafe, not even a food court, it's like a cafeteria. They're like, well, how many, like what percentage of people come in actually eat the food? Like probably not a ton, but it's enough to where even just having that option, it makes the
Oh, but the
experience
price is
better.
so good. Like
Oh,
you
and it
don't
actually the
feel
meatballs.
bad. You don't feel bad spending 6 hours at IKEA because your lunch is going to cost you like $8 for a family of
Exactly.
4.
Exactly. No,
So,
and it's not like in a boring experience either, right?
yeah.
Like the experience is better because you're going through this maze. They're making you look at all the different options, so you're more likely to buy something that you didn't go in there that you think you were going to buy initially. Like it's really, 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 really interesting. It's yeah, that goes back. I mean, to the point of if you looked at that one aspect of your business as a standstill, that one tactic, and they're like, this is losing a ton of money. But if that wasn't there, it would be missing so many other things. Like the $1.50 hot dog at Costco is a brilliant example.
And that to me is an example of a business valuation bingo. You
Yeah.
went and found that right intersection of
Hmm.
what drives you disproportionate value for the rest of your business.
Hmm. Yeah.
But you need to be able to articulate it. And
Hmm.
I think a lot of people don't understand what it is for them and they don't know how to articulate it. And this goes back to what you were saying earlier in our discussion, which is you just got to put that effort in,
Yeah.
right? You got to kind of dissect and understand why your business goes and makes money and be able to do that. But like I go back to, look, you got to understand what's the composition of your revenue. You got to understand what is the composition of your growth. You got to understand what share of your revenue is just pretty reliable that it's going to stick around if you
Hmm.
don't twiddle around with your business too much. And then what makes you money? And do you need to lose money to make more money somewhere else?
Yeah.
And then when are you going to get your cash?
Hmm.
Right. And if you can get your cash back in a way that is sustainable for your business, then spending money to make money is just printing money.
Yeah.
And that would be kind of like my takeaway in terms of how to look at your business vertically. And I think maybe at a future date, we'll kind of cover how to look at it laterally and things like that as well.
Oh yeah.
But to me, like that Costco moment is like bingo. That's how they make money, right?
Hmm.
It's not the sole reason. It's not like the tail wagging the dog here. It's like, oh, like, everybody now go and start selling $1.50 hot dogs and you're going to go
Hmm.
and have, tens of millions of customers coming in. But for Costco, that is such a reinforcement of
Hmm.
the relationship between them and their consumer.
Yeah. No, they're the little strategies that they have, like even just the idea that they bring in products they're not there for a long time. They bring them in only for short periods of time and then they're gone for a little bit. So then there's like emulating the scarcity effect, and like the food just keeps you there longer and it smells nice when you're on the way out. Like it's all these things. Like you're not, most of the time you're not like Costco, going to shopping at Costco. It's usually not like a aggravated, other than like, well, I'm gonna go spend $3,000 now instead of 20 that I really only need. It's one of those things. But I mean, but people gladly will do it because it's Costco and it's part of the experience, right?
So that is kind of like the product supply side of what I call engineered serendipity. Like
Hmm.
IKEA has it with their weird maze
Yep.
because like as you navigate through, you're gonna be like, oh my god, I didn't know that I wanted to buy that thing.
Yeah,
Right? It's
exactly.
like, oh yeah, that make like, oh, that looks so great. I'm like, oh yes, I need to buy this thing as well. Like that to me is engineering serendipity. Costco goes and does it with that like cycling of like special products that kind of come in terms
Hmm.
of what you go and have, right? You go and take a look at like some of the other companies that are kind of sometimes doing it well, which is you're able to go and get like use your points in a special way for a
Yeah.
limited time only, that
Yeah.
it doesn't kind of make you upset that you couldn't do it in another portion of the year. Like I've seen some companies become really good at using like either Cyber Monday or Black Friday or something like that to go and re-engage their consumers around like reinforcing their loyalty over the previous year and
Mhm.
giving like even greater returns on loyalty at that time. That to me is like understanding your loyalty program really well. Like
Yeah.
there's a great one from the company that I buy my gas from, where you get like double the return if you convert your points
Yeah.
for that 4-day stretch between Black Monday and Cyber Monday. Sorry, Black Friday and
Mhm.
Cyber Monday. And I'm
Mhm.
like now I'm like looking forward to it, right? It's gonna come in a
Yeah.
couple of months. And I'm like, oh yeah, like all of me going like, being religious about pumping gas at them for the past year, it's really gonna pay off, right? And it
Yeah.
just seems like almost like ridiculous. And it's like it's not like a crazy sum of money, but I like it's like that expectation of that reward. And I can
Yeah.
tell you, if they kill that, they're gonna piss off so many customers. That's
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. There's so, I mean, frick, we could do an entire hour on Costco, because there's another thing that they do really well is they have that comparative effect too.
Mhm.
So because my mom, when she goes to Costco, she goes to Costco pretty much every Saturday, and she used to, when she's there, there would be like shirts, in the center in most Costco's they have like the shirts and
Yeah.
the blankets and dog beds, and sometimes they have, depends on the time of year, they have barbecues and all this kind of stuff. But if you go into Costco, you're expecting food, right? You're expecting food and so, appliances and these types
Yeah.
of things. And then when you see these other products that aren't supposed to be there, but they are, and it's like you see like a nice pack of like Quicksilver, like Quicksilver. They kind of disappeared, and I think Quicksilver is kind of coming back now. They're an apparel company, but she saw like these Quicksilver shirts,
Mhm.
and if you go into it, like if you went into like a Moores or like somewhere that like has nice clothes, and you saw Quicksilver on the shelves, you'd be like, oh, what are they doing here? But because you saw them in Costco where they're not supposed to be, that's like, oh, Quicksilver, they're
Yeah.
coming back. Like that, you're more likely to buy them. So you have like this comparative, like so that they can put in products that are cheap for them, but your perception of them, because you're here with food, right? They're like, oh man, like these are pretty nice shirts. I might as well grab a couple of them for $20, right? I'm here like that. This is just very like Costco.
They're
Anyways,
they're they're really really well done. It's
they're
and
good.
like
I know.
they have that policy of we're not going to make more money than we have to,
Yeah.
which is
Well,
also
then
kind of
that
like
builds
that's there.
trust.
Yeah.
Then that builds trust with the brand, because I mean that's
But that
like
goes
who wants
back to what I was saying about that vertical valuation driver, which is
Mhm.
recurring revenue, right?
Yeah.
And if you go and compare Costco to any other retailer, their business doesn't make any sense.
None.
Like it doesn't make
At all.
any sense. Like what are you like why are you not here going and charging more money for
Mhm.
your stuff? Like why are you selling this stuff for a lower price than you can find it anywhere else in America or Canada?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like was it I saw this video of Costco opening up in like a new part of Japan a week or two ago, and it's like
Oh,
five
really?
o'clock in the morning, and there's lineups of hundreds of people that are ready
Wow.
to go there. And that to me is kind of like that the buildup of that demand
Mhm.
through the network effect that's there.
Yep.
And again, if you're able to go and articulate that as a business of like people will want to come and buy from us that can't buy from us now. Here's why. Boom, you've now gone and demonstrated why you have an advantage in your industry.
Yeah.
And you
Oh,
go from there.
they're brilliant. Yeah, Japan. I like it. All right, let's see. This one, I think I tried to make this one a little bit more difficult, but anyways, let's see. Blank stock saw a surprising rise in the early 2000s after release of the blank and the subsequent popularity of the blank ecosystem. Its pivot to consumer electronics sparked a dramatic and unexpected growth trajectory.
Microsoft saw the surprising rise in the early 2000s after the release of Xbox and the subsequent popularity of the video game ecosystem.
No.
I could be wrong on this one.
Oh, okay. I finally got them stumped. The other
You
ones are
finally got me?
well. So far, I mean, I'll let you kind of keep going. If I
Pivot to
fill in one of these
consumer
blanks, you're going to get it
electronics.
right away, right away. So let's see if I can give you a hint. This individual, so I guess the founder of this company, that's going to be too easy to screw it. Okay, the founder of this company asked Microsoft, who you're talking to, for a $150 million loan.
Are you talking about Apple? Yeah.
There it is.
Okay. Yeah.
Apple's so yeah. Apple's an interesting one. That whole
Yeah, I viewed it as for some reason I was viewing it more from like a consumer electronics, like consumer entertainment for some reason. But yeah, yeah,
mm,
that's absolutely Apple. Yeah.
yeah, no, 100%. It's that was a really interesting when they were going down like late 90s, and then when they brought Jobs back, like his turnaround strategy was it was like very abrupt, but it was very well executed, obviously, because now you see
He
where they are.
cut so much. Like, he killed most of the product line. They went
They
down
had
to, like, 3
16
different products.
Yeah, and that was it. They went from they had 16 lines, so 16 times however many products per line, right? Because they were in printers, they were in,
They had
all
the
that, like
little
all these
Newton,
different.
the Apple Newton thing,
Oh
which
yeah,
is
yeah,
like
yeah,
a
yeah. They had all these things that
PDA
people didn't
person.
even.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were competing in places they had no business competing in. They were just trying to go as broad as possible to, so they're listening to a few people they shouldn't have, I guess. But yeah, they just went too wide. They didn't, and they were good at nothing at that point. They were just competing in places they shouldn't have been competing. Like they were competing against Xerox in one area, Microsoft in another, and they were just getting completely annihilated. And he brought it down. All he had was brought it down to the one. I can't remember what type of computer it was, but one computer.
It was their iMac. That was
The
the
iMac,
big one,
yeah,
right? And then, like, I remember, like, Legally Blonde was huge back then as a movie, and they had a pink iMac in there. And then, yeah,
yeah,
the iPod came out very soon
yeah.
after as well.
After the release, yeah, the iPod and the
Yeah,
subsequent popularity of the iTunes ecosystem
yeah,
was the third blank.
yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
that's perfect. Hey, Audrina, you nailed it. That's awesome.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
That's
I I love using Apple as an example of, like, why you wanna be able to kind of go and take a look at your business from the standpoint
yeah,
um, of, of just a natural extension of it, but
yeah.
that's something for much larger companies. You can actually go and do it at a smaller scale.
Hmm. Hmm.
You're talking about the coffee example of, like, hey, you can go and buy your own roasted coffee in the store,
Hmm.
which is kind of just like an extension of the experience that's there.
Yep.
And it's an interesting and kind of like that subtlety of looking at it. Like, if I was looking at a coffee store, I'd want to understand who's going and buying the coffee from us. Like, what percentage of our customers are going and buying our own coffee roast that we roast as well.
Hmm.
Um, and again, it's just kind of like the perception versus your ability to execute. Like, sometimes the giving option value, like giving your customers the option of being able to buy something which they
Yeah,
never buy, reinforces the things that they do buy.
yeah.
And
Well,
it
and
just kind
sometimes
of
it
gets
goes,
into human psychology and behavior and goes
yeah,
from there.
and sometimes it can go the other direction, right? Because then people's perception of, okay, this is like it's almost too much.
Hmm.
Like there's too much, so therefore, like their perception is, okay, they must not do that. Because I ran into that before. So one of my wellness or fitness facilities I had, we all of our customers, all of our clients that would come in, and especially in the morning classes, like we had a coffee machine that we had out, and we were all constantly making coffee for everybody. Like before their workout, they would come and hang out for a little bit, and they would have coffee with us and all that kind of stuff. So we were like, everybody here loves coffee. Why don't we let's make some coffee. Let's make some like branded coffee. So there were some roasters that were just a couple doors down. So we're like, let's go see if they'll do a bit of a deal with us and we can sell coffee. And then we had that idea, and then I had a few other ideas that were on top of that, and no one ever came in because we were made coffee, because we offered coffee. No one, not very few, if anybody, actually even bought it.
Yeah.
So it's really understanding, like, why are people, before you make those decisions, why are people, is one of my many mistakes in business, but that's the way it goes. Like, why are people actually coming into your business? Like coffee shops, and we keep using this example, but you can have coffee shops that are so good at the types of lattes that they have, and that's why people come in. And then you go in there, you start offering all this food as well, and then it could take bandwidth away from the good coffee that you're making, right? And it's just sitting there on the shelves, right? And no one's actually buying it because they don't care. They're not there for
Hmm.
breakfast, right? They're not there for like an elaborate brunch sandwich. They're there because your coffee's so freaking good. So, like, good, dive in on that. And then what is like an easy extension off that? Like, instead of just going, let's put in a kitchen in here and then let's make all this breakfast stuff, right? So it's really understanding that it can go kind of both ways.
It's interesting you say that. There's a place that a friend of mine discovered, and I'm now kind of like looking forward to kind of going into. Um, they don't serve any food the first hour they're open.
Hmm.
They only serve coffee because they
Yeah.
went and learned is that there was a percentage of the population that just wanted to buy coffee on their way to work, and there was a different share of the population that also wanted to eat breakfast.
Hmm.
So rather than having the kitchen open and not really generating any revenue,
Hmm.
right? They were smart enough to go and say, "Hey, first hour, coffee only."
Yeah.
Right? And then that when we can actually make the revenue, that's when the kitchen opens up. And again, like that's somebody really understanding their customer base, like the reviews for their places like are exceptional.
Mhm.
And they really kind of cater to who is the typical customer that comes and buys. And they're very in touch with their customer base, and they seem to be running a very good place. And this just kind of goes back into, why are we having this conversation in the first place? You're trying to, if you're trying to sell your business, it's because you have whatever occasion you need to go and do so, because you're ready to sell your business because you're ready to move on or retire, or you're ready to sell your business because somebody wants to go and buy it.
Yeah.
And I always go back to, when somebody wants to buy your business, when you're not trying to sell it, that is probably the time that you should have the highest degree of scrutiny.
Mhm.
Because what is it that they see that you didn't?
Yeah. Oh
Right?
yeah.
So that's kind of why I kind of go and put into this piece.
Big
So,
time.
yeah.
All right. Last one. We'll wrap up here. Thank everybody for sticking. We've had a ton of people on X today. We had like 33 people from X on here, but I think it's kind of hard for them to comment from X. But anyways, in October 2008, briefly became the world's most valuable company by market capitalization due to a short squeeze. And capitalization, that's for everybody that people here that don't know, that's just like the total available shares, right? It's the total available shares that are available for a company to publicly to purchase. The stock surged over 300% in 2 days after Porsche revealed it had control of 74% of the shares, catching short sellers off guard.
Was this Volkswagen?
You're freaking good at this. That was Volkswagen.
So
That was Volkswagen.
sorry, I love Porsche, so I've just like been
Don't say
tracking
sorry. No,
what
good
happens
thing.
with them for a
It's a
while.
good thing. It's a good thing. We might have to do another one. So the only vehicle that I know of, I even know it because Volkswagen, they're German, and I know that they have they're known for being higher quality. At least they used to be. Is the Jetta? The Jetta was like, it kind of like put gas efficiency, like fuel efficiency, on the map as being cool. Like Jetta was really that first one.
I remember their 1,000 miles per tank ads or something like that.
Yeah.
They had, which were just wild, and because it crossed that like expectation principle that is there. I'm going back to Costco. Like nobody believes that you can have a good hot dog for $1.50, but they have a good hot dog for $1.50, and enough people go and talk about it. And I think that's what went and drove Volkswagen was. I don't think it was 1,000 miles. I think it was like 600 miles per tank, or like 1,000
It
kilometers.
was a lot though, but it's a small tank. Like you could fill at the time. I mean, also gas
Yeah.
prices were a little bit different than they are now, but you could fill the tank up for $15-20, and then
then could be able to go really, really far. And that to me, I think, is that big piece. Like the Apple example that you went and give, like 1,000 phones in your pocket, right? It's just such an incredible, relatable element that's there. And I think kind of going and understanding the essence of whatever your equivalent is, and it doesn't have to be at that same kind of like copy optimization that was there on those, iTunes or iPod ads that Apple went and had. But it's again, like, what's the essence of our business? Like, if your business is just like any other business, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like I look at a lot of the stories of people going and buying like laundromats, and they're like, deeply unsexy money generating businesses. I just went and bought this laundromat. It cost me $400,000. And people are like, oh my God, $400,000. They're like, yeah, it's month 14. I made back my money for what I paid for it.
Yeah.
And people are like, what? You made your money back on a laundromat in 14 months? And it's like, yeah, unsexy business.
Yeah, and sometimes
Right?
those are the best ones too, right? Well, that goes to knowing what business you're in. Like Kodak made that big mistake too. They thought they were in the Polaroid business, but they weren't. They were in the like moment capturing business, so if they would have realized that, they would have, okay, let's switch to digital a little bit sooner rather than double
And they
down.
had the patents, by the way. Kodak had a
Yeah.
lot of the digital patents, but they got addicted to what was making money, which goes back to what I go and say. When do you need to spend money? When do you need to cannibalize from yourself to be able to do so? Because your customer base is going and evolving what their needs are. And this is why, business valuation, you're selling your strategy.
Yeah.
Right.
100%. No,
and people then just go and put a number behind it. But if you're going and putting a number behind it, that's the default in your industry. That's the average value of strategies in that industry. So you better articulate why your strategy is so much better.
Which usually isn't that great
Mhm.
at all. All right, last one, because you got that one so quickly. This stock price skyrocketed from $20 to over 300. So that's like 15x within a few
Yeah.
weeks in January 2021, driven largely by retail investors on Reddit. This one's gonna be easy.
This is the one that upset all the Bitcoin investors because it made
Everybody.
people so much more money. This is GameStop.
This is
So,
GameStop.
yeah.
This is GameStop. And I'm glad that we were able to get that one in there, because this one shows how ridiculous these publicly traded companies' valuation multiples can be.
Mhm.
Like Reddit, and was this really the first time? It was probably the biggest example, definitely, whether it was the first or the biggest, either one, of how like social media, how social trends can affect the valuation of businesses.
Well, it was a perfect storm example, right? Because this was
Mm.
the whole Robin Hood environment as well,
Yeah.
because it was so easy for you to go and trade stocks. Like, look, like when I went and had
Yeah.
my
Mhm.
initial exposure in the 90s, listen, you couldn't buy or sell more than less than 50 shares of a company,
Yeah.
right? And then like that went and changed, right? Like you had to buy a mutual fund if you wanted to go and buy shares, less
Mhm.
than 50 shares of a company. Um, the protocols on like being qualified to go and make purchases, like all these things have really gone and changed. And this is why I'm very reluctant to go and use comparables in terms of like how behavior happened on public markets or even
Yeah.
private markets over decades, because things have actually changed a lot in the fundamentals that are there in the background. Like GameStop was a meme stock. People were going in and just playing around with it because they could do that.
Yeah.
And you went and the bleep coins that we went and had as well, where all of these things tried to emulate Bitcoin, and they would just go and run these coin bonanzas, and people would just go and market them. And because you saw enough noise about them, you're like, oh, maybe there's something here. I'm going to go and buy some, and then they skyrocket. You're like, oh yeah, I'm a millionaire on squidgy coin or something like that. And it's like 2 weeks later, it's like, oh crap, I lost all my money
Yeah.
because the hype around it went away. And look, this to me is like the Dutch tulip bulb moment. It just comes back.
Yeah.
It's just now it's happening more frequently because we have the internet.
All the time. Well, even what was it? This was with Bitcoin. I can't remember. Was it Ethereum or no? It wasn't a Dogecoin or whatever it was called.
Dogecoin went
When
and did
Elon
it.
Musk
There was
tweeted about it.
Shiba Inu coin.
Yeah.
There's a whole
Yeah.
bunch of these, and then Elon Musk went and like said, "Oh, I have Dogecoin," and then it just
Yeah.
like went
Everyone
through
like
the world.
skyrocketed. It's
Yeah.
crazy. I know, it's so
So,
wild. Yeah, no, the world is just changing so much, and that's going to become more and more. And I don't know whether those two examples that we gave with GameStop and the Dogecoin will wake people up to it, but I don't think so. I really don't think so. I think
we'll
it's
see
going to
what
continue
happens.
to be a thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Edgar, I really appreciate you sticking with me. And again, we had a ton of people on X joining today, so I really appreciate everybody here. I know it's kind of tough to comment on there, but I really appreciate everybody, whether you're watching this live or whether you're watching this recording afterwards. Thank you so much for being here and sticking around. Edgar, we're gonna do this a lot. Obviously, I love talking to you, and I'm
Thank you.
excited to make you kind of a regular in some of these things. So I really appreciate you. And again, everybody else, thank you for being here, and keep chasing your next summit.